Everybody, this is Dr. Michael Kay from the Center for Functional Health, and today we're going to talk about the new food guidelines. So, last week we talked about the state of our health in the United States, which is not the greatest, as we shared. And last week, the big hubbub was the new dietary guidelines for Americans, 2025-2030, and this was released. And now the nutrition wars, they start to begin. Who is right? Who is wrong? Doctors of all types are weighing in, taking positions. The RNs are speaking up. The groups of certified nutritionists are talking. The influencers on social media. And then we have the camps of vegetarians, vegans, carnivores, ketos. Everyone's gearing up and they all have their opinions. Well, you know about opinions. Let's not forget, when you talk about nutrition, regardless of your stance, certain people they believe that you align with the way you eat is what you believe. As a concerned patient, who do you believe? Listen, I'm just happy that we're talking about nutrition. Let's put all that craziness aside and think about nutrition in relation to your own health. Can you imagine a person who lives in another country where food is not in abundance, and you tell them that over here we fight about our food? It sounds kind of bonkers. We should be grateful that we have enough food, and some people do not. Now, sidebar to that. It's crazy to me that the amount of food waste that we have in this country, it's my belief that no one in the U.S. should go to bed hungry. I also find it odd that we actually attach food to ideologies versus physiologies. So let's talk about food guidelines. And before I do, I find it funny that everyone is up in arms about this guide. And to be honest, it's not too bad. Some flaws, yes, but not too bad. And believe me, it's not like people listened to the other first set of guidelines, and most probably won't listen to these guidelines at all. And the operative word is it's a guideline. Listen, we tell people right on the side of a cigarette package that some nasty physiological stuff is going to happen to you, yet people still smoke. The price of cigarettes have increased, maybe caused a slowdown in the purchasing rate, but people still smoke. Some of my patients quit, but for the most part, they still smoke. So let's talk about these guidelines. These guidelines recommend whole nutrient-dense foods, protein, dairy, vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, and whole grains. They say paired with a dramatic reduction in highly processed foods laden with refined carbohydrates, added sugars, excess sodium, unhealthy fats, and chemical additives, this approach, by getting rid of these, can actually change the health trajectory of so many Americans. Makes sense. So far, right? Get rid of the highly processed foods. They share some stats. Nearly 90% of healthcare spending goes to treating people who have chronic diseases. Many of these illnesses are not genetic destiny. They are the predictable result of the standard American diet, a diet which over time has become reliant on highly processed foods and coupled with a sedentary lifestyle. Okay, makes sense. True, we like to say that genetics loads the gun and the environment, think lifestyle, pulls the trigger. They go on to say, this was a revolutionary proposal. The cap on saturated fats has been a bedrock piece of advice since the launch of this policy in 1980, and is why so many Americans avoid red meat, drink skim milk, and opt to cook with seed oils over butter. All right, now let's leave the consumption of fat debate for another time. And if you really want to dig deep about fat, please read the book, The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teichholz. Pretty good book. I think you'll like it. All right, the guidelines say eat the right amount for you. Pay attention to portion sizes, particularly for foods and beverages higher in calories. Well, that makes sense. The portion size is what gets most of my patients. Take nuts, for example. It's about 28 grams, a quarter cup. That's a serving. Not many. Most of us, though, grab handfuls. Most cereal is 3/4 a cup, up to about 30 to 45 grams. However, most have a bowl of cereal. And then the guidelines talk about hydration. Hydration is a key factor in overall health. It's simple. Drink more water, add some electrolytes, lemon, lime, pinch of salt. You should be drinking and peeing, plus it will get you out of your chair, so at least you get moving. Now, my favorite, prioritize protein. Get protein foods at every meal. Think eggs, poultry, seafood, red meat, as well as a variety of plant source protein, beans, peas, lentils, legumes, nuts, seeds, and soy. And we can talk about that another time. We're going to have a whole nother conversation around protein and amino acid profiles. The guidelines say that protein serving goals is 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, adjusting as needed based on your individual caloric requirements. Personally, in my opinion, 1.6, 1.8 grams of protein should be the goal. So for those of you who did not pay attention in school to metric system, myself included, and remember when they told us everything was going to go metric, that would work out to be approximately 109 to 122 grams of protein for a 150-pound male. That's how it works out. Now, in my practice, I find that our female and elderly populations do not eat enough protein, plain and simple. All right, so next the guidelines say consume dairy. All right, sounds pretty good, but dairy is an excellent source of protein. It has healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals. That's good. Although true, to be honest, many of my patients don't do well with dairy, often experiencing gut issues to skin issues. So it may not be healthy for everyone. Now, a big win, and I was so pleased that they talked about this, they recognized that the gut plays a direct role in our health. I find that many conventional physicians, not all, but many, do not believe that health is correlated with nutrition. For me, the power of health is at the end of the fork. So, back to the gut. The guidelines actually state the following. Your gut contains trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms called the microbiome. I love talking about the microbiome. A healthy diet supports a well-balanced microbiome and healthy digestion. Highly processed foods can disrupt this balance, while vegetables, fruits, fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, miso, and high-fiber foods support a diverse microbiome, which may be beneficial for health. Nicely done. Not too bad. However, not all people do well with fermented foods and lots of fibers. So there is nuance in nutrition. Now, the guidelines say they recommend eat vegetables and fruits throughout the day. Sounds like a solid kind of opinion, although eating vegetables and fruits throughout the day is relatively good, not absolute, relatively good, because we want to be careful because certain physiologies do not respond well to lots of fruits and vegetables. Now, you and I can agree that broccoli may be healthy, but probably not healthy for a person that has irritable bowel syndrome with diarrhea. It feels like a rototiller in their gut. The guidelines say incorporate healthy fats. In general, saturated fat consumption should not exceed 10% of total daily calories. Now, this will be difficult, especially if you're eating animal protein and you're adding tallow, butter, and olive oil. Now, we're going to leave that for a whole separate conversation. Next, it talks about prioritizing fiber-rich whole grains. Sounds good. However, may not be for everyone. I've seen many of my patients who stepped away from grains experience a remarkable improvement, changes in their symptoms from gut issues to brain fog. They say that whole grain serving goals should be 2 to 4 servings per day, adjusting as needed based upon your individual caloric requirements. They talked about the packaged breakfast options, crackers and stuff like that. And for me, in my practice, I'm going to push back on that statement. As again, I've seen many patients who have eliminated these types of foods and have done very well. It's nuanced, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to personalized nutrition. So we want to think about it in different ways. Next, it talks about limit highly processed foods, added sugars, and refined carbohydrates. And listen, you can't go wrong with the following. Significantly reduce the consumption of highly processed, refined carbohydrates such as white bread, ready-to-eat, or other foods that are salty or sweet, chips, cookies, candies, added sugars, and lots of increased sodium and salt, right? You want to avoid that. You want to limit foods and beverages that include artificial colors, petroleum-based dyes, artificial preservatives, and low-calorie, non-nutritive sweeteners. Okay, that makes sense. Stay away from added sugars to help. And to think about that, identify other sources of sugars. You want to stay away from it. So the word sugar or syrup or anything that ends in OSE, it's a sugar. You want to keep an eye on that. Added sugars may appear on ingredient labels under different names. Just look that up on the internet. So many different names for sugar: high fructose corn syrup, agave syrup, corn syrup, glucose, dextrose, sucrose, maltodextrin, cane sugar, beet sugar, turbinado, maltose, lactose, fruit juice concentrate, honey molasses. So many different names. So you just want to take a look at that. So solid recommendations. And then in the end, about alcohol, limit alcohol. End of story. We know a lot of alcohol is not good, and even a little bit is not that great. So the guidelines offer recommendations also for the pediatric population, even the vegetarian and vegan population. Vegetarians and vegans should be aware of the fake vegetarian foods and keep an eye on their health, as they often lack vitamins A, D, E, and B, especially B12, calcium, magnesium, and iron. I find that most of my vegan and vegetarian patients are just doing it incorrectly. They have a thought process that they need to do it better from a physiological perspective. So in the end, We have the following to summarize. The previous guidelines leaned towards the low fat products, which wasn't great, high grain intake, which I think was super, and permissive thresholds regarding sugar and ultra processed foods. I think we should just skip that. The Nutrition Network summarized these new guidelines as follows, and it makes sense. Protein based foods are prioritized, including animal source proteins such as eggs, dairy, fish, and red meat. You want to think about dietary fats, they're no longer demonized, and natural fats are good, including fats like tallow, and all it's recognized as part of a healthy diet. And then we have grain. Talk about grain recommendations. Grain recommendations have been dramatically reduced in this guideline, reflecting growing recognition of carbohydrate intolerance and insulin resistance. We're going to be talking more about that. And processed foods and added sugars have no place in the recommended dietary pattern. So, pretty decent. The emphasis shifted from abstract nutrients to really recognizable foods. So, eating whole foods, that's the whole goal. So, moving forward, we want to think about the root cause of the increasing insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction that's been growing year after year. And for me, the power of health is at the end of your fork and not always in a bottle. Next, you want to increase your protein intake. Think about satiety, think about muscle, think about brain, think about metabolic health. And consider healthy fats as part of your nutrition profile. Decrease sugar and ultra processed foods. That's really important. That'll go a long way. Chronic diet-driven diseases, including obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, and metabolic dysfunction, now affects hundreds of millions of people worldwide. Now listen, we can talk about the clinical side of fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, kidney diseases, strokes, heart attacks, cancer, gut dysfunction, and the list goes on. We can talk about medicine, supplements, exercise, all of that. But I want to end with the following. Not the clinical side of these physiological presentations, but the life-changing aspects of these presentations that may be avoided or lessened by following the right path. I chose this field because I've seen the ravishing effects of these chronic diseases. They're not good. I was there when my mom was diagnosed with oat cell carcinoma, that's lung cancer, 1 year after a quadruple bypass. I was there when my father had heart attacks and multiple strokes. Thankfully, there was medicine to help them, at least for a little while, a little bit of time. However, it took away their independence, and in the end, they did not get to see their grandchildren. And the remaining life that they led was compromised. So much missed and so unnecessary. And they thought I was the crazy one when I told them when I was in ninth grade that we have to change the way we eat. So, should you follow these guidelines? The guidelines are exactly that. They're guidelines. Not good for everyone, but they're guidelines. Should you ask ChatGPT what to do next? Well, I can be honest with you. I've been seeing an increase in the wrong recommendations offered by these large language models, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Grok, whichever. When people ask me what kind of diet should I follow, what kind of vitamins should I take, my reply is always the same. It depends on your personal biology, your labs, your current physiological state, genetics, and your environment. So let's figure out what you need. The operative word being you. So in the end, stop eating highly processed foods. Choose whole foods, don't eat too much, think protein forward, improve your hydration, sleep, movement, and recovery. You see, the goal is progression, not perfection. There's no failure, only lessons learned. So that's it for now. I look forward to seeing you all next Sunday. Stay healthy and strong.